Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships and healing from narcissistic relationships. I'm going to take on a topic I have taken on in the past, but people keep asking for more on it, so I'm here to talk about it again, and that is to speak to those of you who are parents of narcissistic children. Now, I have addressed this topic, like I said, a few times. But I think we do need boosters on this particular topic because this may be one of the most treacherous, painful, and sort of difficult to heal from variations of the narcissistic relationship. It is a very, very unique sort of area in narcissistic abuse. Many parents feel that all of the content out there, and I know I've certainly weathered this criticism myself, is basically pointing the finger at them, the parents, as being the problem. It isn't that simple. Both parents, for example, aren't one person. Each parent contributes something different to the relationship. Many parents out there also have, if they have multiple children, you may have one narcissistic child and other child or children who are actually really lovely, well-adjusted, kind people. So it's a different kind of grief. I actually remember hearing about one situation, it's the only time I've ever heard of this, in which all 4 adult children were deeply narcissistic in one family. Now, it turns out the parents were too, so it made sense. But let me tell you, this is not a family that you'd want to spend Thanksgiving with. I am going to start out by saying from the jump, this is a depressing video because there's no magic nugget I could give you. If I did, I would be sort of almost kind of like, I feel like lying. Because this is especially the case if your adult narcissistic child won't go into therapy. And even if they do, they may still double down on blaming you as a parent in perpetuity. It's one thing to be blamed, okay? It's yet another to tolerate ongoing rage, verbal abuse, and extortionate demands, and that they're being told there's nothing you can do to make it right, so at least you should give them money. So, yes, they may have blame for you, but the ongoing abusive behavior is never okay. Parents of narcissistic children vacillate between, is it ever okay to go no contact with a child? Can they change? Is there something else going on that we need to be aware of? First of all, those of you with children who are somewhere between the ages of 13 and maybe 23 or so, it sucks. And yes, your children's narcissistic behavior now is exhausting and awful, but their personality is still developing a lot. And a lot of what you're seeing is adolescence, and there can be massive shifts. I remember talking with a family who did have a son. I think his son was like in his mid to late 20s, and the son was really antagonistic. The key issue in talking with this family is what we were looking at how long this son's behavior was a thing. Now, many parents of narcissistic children have said their kid has been a handful for a long time, demanding, entitled, mean, irresponsible, oppositional. But since the brain is still developing, then with each day, with this particular family, I was saying it sounds like his behavior hasn't changed at all. But if each day is going by and there's no change, I got to tell you, there's probably less of a chance of correction, but it's still a work in progress. It's difficult to engage in radical acceptance when it's your own child, especially when you were, in fact, a player in their developmental history, where you may even see some of the mistakes you made. All of us as parents, by the way, make mistakes, but also what you did do right. You may see that your other kids are doing just fine. You may also have regrets if your co-parent was a narcissistic person and you can see the effects there. Each one of these stories is different, but radical acceptance that your child may not change, that you may not ever have a healthy relationship with them, and that they may continue lashing out at you or their siblings, that radical acceptance is some of the most devastating you could ever experience. Adult narcissism and antagonism is, as I've said many, many times, it's a story that can be told with clarity backwards. You can see that their narcissism at the age of 30 really does, it's correlated very highly with their entitled and awful behavior at 17. But there are lots of entitled and difficult 17-year-olds that actually come out to be perfectly fine adults once the frontal lobe fully develops, and they're nice. And so we don't do well from 17 forward, but 30 backwards, sure. And narcissism's narcissism. It's not going to be different just because it's your child. It's always going to be a personality style that's resistant to change. That's how maladaptive and antagonistic styles are. But that recognition when this is happening in your own adult child is devastating. What many parents say to me, ask me, is they say, I don't want to give up on my own child. They're my child. I want to maintain a relationship with them. But short of us having to totally give in to all the demands of our adult child entirely, we don't know how to proceed. One place to start is to ask whether there's other stuff happening. Is your adult child's behavior worse because of drugs and alcohol? Then exploring and hoping that maybe the adult child may consider substance use treatment. Are there other patterns like manic episodes? There'll be periods of time they don't sleep very much. They make bizarre, almost delusional, grandiose statements. But mixed in there can be a lot of what looks like narcissistic behavior, like entitlement. If it's mania, though, then you may be dealing with a major psychiatric illness that requires evaluation and ongoing treatment. Therapy is such an essential first step in addressing this, but unfortunately, especially if your adult narcissistic child is very oppositional, they will straight out refuse it, and there is really no way to compel mental health treatment in someone who is not suicidal, homicidal, or gravely disabled, which is often not the case with most parents managing narcissistic adult children. The catch-22 is that most people obviously do want a good relationship or some relationship with their adult child. But parents in these situations say, how am I supposed to proceed? They won't honor boundaries. They become really enraged and really scary when I set boundaries. They expect money and other resources. It feels almost transactional. And if you say no, they rage and lose it. But if you say yes, you're almost creating this endless, dependent, manipulative pit of money and resource you're pouring into them. The adult child may keep pivoting to being a victim, consistently calling their parents out for being the reason, for what's being responsible for their bad behavior. It's times like this we have to lean back into this idea of multiple truths. So what does that look like? This is your child. You love your child. Your child's behavior is unacceptable. Your child is refusing therapy. You have to set boundaries with your child, otherwise you're enabling and emboldening them, and then things could get really bad. If you set boundaries, they keep calling you terrible names. They sometimes may take things from you, or they may cut off communication with you. Your child is so angry at times, you're worried about aggression or violence, and there's been times that they've thrown stuff or slammed doors or driven out of the driveway in an aggressive way. And at those times, you do need to be aware that narcissism is correlated with aggression and violence. You have to recognize that your child may not change, and this may not be the close and loving relationship that you would hope, and that this may dwindle into no relationship at all. All those multiple truths together are really uncomfortable. Because sometimes there is no path forward to the relationship you want, especially not without therapy. Some parents keep future faking themselves, saying maybe just a little bit more money, maybe if they get a little bit older, maybe they find a partner. And then some parents say, at least if I give them money and pay their rent, I know where they are. Maybe if we get them the car or the apartment, then they'll be able to hold a job, then they'll be happier. It can, like I said, start feeling like extortion after a while. At a minimum, if this is your situation and it's getting worse with an adult child, make sure your financial information is secure, and talk to a trust or estate attorney to make sure your stuff isn't ordered, because as you get older, this is all going to get a lot more complicated. Obviously, all of this, as with all of narcissism, is on a continuum, with some narcissistic children just being kind of sort of overgrown brats who are very entitled and ungrateful and sort of mean and contemptuous, while at the other side are adult children who are aggressive and entitled in a manner that can culminate in theft and painfully manipulative. Only you know where your situation falls on this spectrum. All of this can feel harder if this is your only child, and now it feels like there's no opportunity to cultivate a family network. Adult narcissistic children will blame you for everything. And if you are in a sort of sandwich generation, you had your own narcissistic parent, and now you have a narcissistic adult child, the grief can feel bottomless. Parents themselves who have adult narcissistic children really need to consider getting into therapy with someone themselves. ideally someone who understands narcissism and narcissistic abuse, to help them process their own grief and loss. Like I said, there is no magic answer here, and every family is going to do what works for them. But there is a point of grief, and for every family, that sort of rock bottom end of the story can look quite different. So I hope that sheds some light on this. I do recognize it's an ongoing and difficult situation for people who have adult narcissistic children, and of all sort of the relational issues, even more than intimate relationships and some of the others, this with adult children may be one of the ones I've seen to be the most devastating for the people involved. Thanks again.